Chapter 1: The Birth of a Trucker's Legacy.
In the heart of a sprawling mid-spring night, deep within the warm, comforting confines of the little trucker kennel, a small miracle was taking place. Ruby, a fine, agile miniature pinscher and granddaughter of the original little trucker, was giving birth. Her dark eyes gleamed in the dim light of the whelping room as she whined softly, a chorus of tiny squeals and whimpers rising from her side. The miracle was sixfold, each a tiny, wriggling testament to the lineage of champions. Ruby was an extraordinary creature, a unique blend of graceful agility and an inherited sense of loyalty that came from a long lineage of show champions and over-the-road trekking dogs. Her glossy, reddish coat was her badge of honor, and her attentive eyes held wisdom beyond her years. On this night, she was passing on her legacy to the next generation. Overseeing this delicate spectacle was little Abner, the proud father, an intelligent and resilient miniature pinscher who was every bit as accomplished as Ruby. His proud stance, a mix of elegance and brute strength, coupled with his keen sense of alertness, mirrored his exceptional lineage. Little Abner watched attentively, his eyes riveted on his offspring, his heart swelling with pride. One puppy, in particular, stood out amongst the newly born litter. His coat, a brilliant red, shimmered in the low light, already hinting at the vitality that would soon be discovered within him. He was restless, always moving, always seeking. His tiny squeals were more persistent, more demanding, an early indication of a personality that would be unlike any other. This little one, not yet named, was destined for greatness. He was born into a family of champions, with the blood of trailblazers coursing through his tiny veins. This little puppy, small and seemingly insignificant, would grow to hold a pivotal role in continuing the legacy of the little trucker kennel. He would soon take to the road, a miniature canine co-pilot to a seasoned over-the-road trucker. In the tranquility of the birthing room, as Ruby comforted her newborns and Abner watched on protectively, the beginnings of an extraordinary journey were taking shape. This was more than just the birth of a puppy. It was the birth of a future champion, the birth of a legacy. The unnamed pup, soon to be known as Jake, had begun his journey not just as a show dog, but as a noble companion of the open road. As the spring night deepened, and the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, the little red puppy nestled closer to Ruby, unaware of his destined path. For now, he was simply a puppy, born into love and warmth, on a night that would forever mark the beginning of his journey into the world of trucking.
Chapter 2: Jake's New Beginning.
David, the caretaker of the little trucker kennel, had a knack for matching his miniature pinscher puppies with their prospective owners. He was an older man, with a thick country accent, wise eyes and a hearty laugh that reverberated through the grounds. Over the years, he'd learned to watch each puppy, discerning their personalities, quirks, and characteristics to ensure the best match. One such request had recently arrived from a man named John. An experienced over-the-road truck driver for a well-known company, John often spent days, sometimes weeks, on the lonely stretches of interstate, a solitude broken only by the calls on the CB radio and the hum of his truck engine. The solitary nature of his job, while initially appealing, had slowly morphed into a blanket of loneliness. It was this longing for companionship that led him to contact David. David knew instantly which pup would be best suited to John. His gaze fell on the red puppy, who, despite his size, had already established himself as the king of his litter. There was something about his audacity, his tenacious spirit that reminded David of a trucker's resilience. This little guy was more than just a leader, he was a force of nature. He was the first to open his eyes, the first to venture away from the warmth of Ruby, and the first to bark, a tiny sound that echoed in the quiet kennel. When the other puppies tumbled together in a mass of fur and tiny teeth, it was always this red pup that instigated the play, his small body fearlessly launching into the fray. He had a way of keeping his siblings in check, not with aggression, but with a born confidence that was impossible to challenge. David fondly recalled one incident when he'd found the small red pup at the top of the puppy pile, sitting like a king upon his throne. The others were wriggling beneath him, but he remained there, unperturbed, looking as majestic as a puppy could. On another occasion, the red puppy had managed to escape the confines of the whelping box. He'd discovered him in the kitchen, a loaf of bread almost as big as him gripped firmly in his jaws. David chuckled at the memory. This little guy was an adventurer at heart. So, when John came to meet his new co-driver, David presented the bright-eyed red pup. A spark of recognition flashed between man and dog, a bond silently forming. In that moment, John decided on the perfect name for his new friend, Jake, named after the Jake brake that played such a crucial role in his job. As John held Jake in his strong arms, he looked at the puppy with a mix of joy and anticipation. A new journey was about to begin for them both, one filled with open roads and companionship. David watched on, satisfied with the match. The red puppy, now Jake, was off to embrace his destiny. A legacy was about to continue, and a trucker's companion was born.
Chapter 3. Training Days on the Road.
The life of an over-the-road trucker was filled with challenges, but for John, training little Jake was proving to be one of the most formidable. The little miniature pincher was full of energy and mischief, making the cab of the truck his personal playground. David had advised John on the basics of potty training: no food or water for at least 4 hours before bedtime. That way, Jake's last potty break would hopefully hold him until the morning. For the first few weeks, the system was hit or miss, largely because Jake was still just a puppy, learning to navigate the world and understand the rules. But life with Jake on the road wasn't all potty breaks and training schedules. There was a particular brand of chaos that came with keeping a rambunctious miniature pincher in the cab of a truck. John learned this the hard way when his favorite pair of work gloves became Jake's chew toy. Following that, any object of value was quickly stowed out of Jake's reach. The cab of the truck transformed, taking on a distinctly puppy-proofed appearance. Despite these minor incidents, John wouldn't trade his new companion for the world. Jake's energy was infectious and helped to stave off the loneliness of the road. As time passed, consistency and patience paid off. Jake started to understand the routine, and before long, the cab of the truck became accident-free. Every successful potty break was celebrated with cheers and praises, making Jake feel like the champion he was destined to be. One particular quirk soon endeared Jake to everyone who witnessed it. Every time Jake did his business, he would perform a little dance, circling, prancing, and strutting with such enthusiasm that it was impossible not to smile. The spectacle quickly became known as the Dookie Dance, and it became a beloved ritual. Truck stops, rest areas, and loading docks soon became stages for Jake's Dookie Dance. Laughter would ring out as drivers, staff, and passers-by stopped to watch the tiny miniature pincher's enthusiastic performance. Jake would finish his dance, look up with those sparkling eyes, and appear even more delighted with the applause. His antics brought a rare moment of levity to the often grueling life on the road, cementing his status as a favorite amongst the trucking community. As Jake's training progressed, so too did the bond between John and his furry companion. Through all the trials, errors, and countless Dookie dances, John found a loyal friend in Jake. Their journey together was just beginning, but it was clear that they were an inseparable pair, both on and off the road.
Chapter 4. The Smoky Detector and the Voice of the Airwaves.
Every journey has its unexpected twists, and John's journey with Jake was no exception. Among the long stretches of highway and countless truck stops, Jake began to exhibit some surprising and delightful abilities that brought laughter and amazement to John and their fellow road warriors. For one, Jake developed a keen knack for spotting hidden police cars, a skill that proved invaluable for John and his fellow truck drivers. It was almost as if Jake had a sixth sense, a built-in smoky detector. Whenever they approached a speed trap, Jake would start to grow restless. he would stand up on his little legs, scanning the side of the road with his bright eyes, a low whine escaping his throat. No officer could escape his keen gaze, whether they were tucked behind a billboard or concealed in a thicket. John found himself braking more than once, just in time to avoid a costly ticket thanks to Jake's timely warnings. Word soon got around about Jake's smoky detection skills, and he quickly became a legend amongst the trekking community. CB radio conversations often included the phrase, "Got a Jake alert over here," to indicate a potential speed trap. The little miniature pincher had transformed into a four-legged sentinel of the highway, a watchdog against speed tickets. Jake's ability to understand CB radio conversations added another layer to the humor. It was as though he understood when he was being talked about and would time his barks perfectly to amuse John and whoever was on the other end of the line. Whether it was a fellow driver or a friend at the trucking company, a bark from Jake would always follow a mention of his name, causing everyone listening to burst out laughing. John would say over the CB radio, "Yeah, Jake spotted another Smoky just now. Saved me from a ticket again," and without missing a beat, Jake would let out a triumphant bark as if to confirm the story. This playful banter lightened the mood, and the timing of Jake's barks became a subject of constant amusement on the airwaves. These moments of levity helped break the monotony of the long drives, and John couldn't have asked for a better companion than Jake. The little dog with his sharp eyes, keen senses, and impeccable timing had made their journey on the open road more enjoyable than John ever thought possible. And so, their adventure together continued, with Jake not just John's co-driver, but also his entertainer, his protector, and above all, his best friend. And above all.
Chapter 5, The Loyal Companion.
Loyalty is an innate trait in dogs, and Jake was no exception. From the moment he had entered John's life, the little miniature pincher had shown an unwavering loyalty that warmed John's heart and provided an unshakable sense of security. One day, while John was at a truck stop fueling up, he had a surprise visitor. John was focused on the fuel pump, oblivious to a figure approaching him from behind. But Jake was alert, his bright eyes watching John's back with a vigilance that belied his small size. The moment he spotted the approaching stranger, Jake sprang up, barking sharply, his body tense. The figure, surprised by the sudden sound, halted in his tracks. Turning around, John saw the stranger, a fellow trucker looking to borrow a fuel card. Though harmless, the incident drove home how vigilant Jake was. He was not just a co-driver or a friend, he was John's guard dog, always ready to protect him. This vigilance extended into the night as well. Truck stops weren't always the safest places, and having Jake in the cab gave John peace of mind. The little dog seemed to have a sixth sense for when something wasn't right, his ears perking up and body stiffening whenever anyone approached the truck. More than once, John had woken up to Jake's soft growls, looking out to find someone loitering a bit too close to their rig for comfort. Knowing that Jake was on guard allowed John to sleep more soundly, secure in the knowledge that his loyal companion was keeping watch. During their long hauls, John also fell ill once. They were miles away from the nearest town when John began to feel unwell. Weakness washed over him, making it difficult to even hold the steering wheel. Pulling over to the side of the road, he slumped in his seat, fatigue pulling his eyelids down. Throughout the ordeal, Jake never left John's side. He nestled next to John, warmth radiating from his small body. His soft whine seemed to be his way of offering sympathy and assurance. When John finally recovered, Jake was the first to celebrate, his prancing steps an evident display of relief and joy. Jake's loyalty was steadfast, whether it was guarding John at a fuel pump, alerting him to speed traps, or simply staying by his side when he was sick. His dedication went beyond the usual dog-owner relationship. They were partners, confidants, and family. To Jake, being loyal to John wasn't a duty, it was a way of life. and that unwavering loyalty made every mile of their journey together feel a little safer, a little less lonely, and a lot more like home.
Chapter 6, Jake, the Airwaves Hero.
Life on the open road often teetered between long stretches of calm and moments of unexpected excitement. One such moment unfolded during a routine stop at a bustling truck stop when a frantic woman rushed into the diner, her face pale and eyes filled with tears. She was crying out for her lost little girl. As soon as John and the other truckers heard her pleas, the atmosphere shifted from casual to alert. They quickly rallied together, coordinating a search using their CB radios. John, with little Jake by his side, took up the search for the back parking lot and the surrounding area. If the child had wandered off, she might have ended up there. Jake, with his keen sense of smell and hearing, was invaluable during the search. He trotted along, nose to the ground, fully alert and tuned into the task at hand. It wasn't long before Jake's ears perked up. A soft whimpering sound reached his ears, one that was almost drowned out by the hum of idling truck engines. He darted towards a thick bush near a trailer, pulling John behind him. There, huddled in the bushes and crying softly, was the missing little girl. Her dress had gotten caught in the branches, and she couldn't free herself. With a sigh of relief, John gently disentangled her dress from the bushes, scooping her up into his arms. Jake danced around them, his excitement clear. He had found her. He had helped bring her to safety. The little dog was no stranger to being a hero on the highway, but today he was a hero of a different kind. Back at the truck stop, a wave of relief swept over the crowd as John walked in, the little girl in his arms. The reunion between the mother and daughter was heartfelt, full of tears and grateful smiles. The truckers cheered, patting John and Jake on the back, their faces filled with pride. Their community had come together in a time of crisis, and they had triumphed. News of the incident spread, and by evening, a local television crew arrived at the truck stop. Cameras rolled as they interviewed John, the lost girl, and her mother, and of course, the hero of the hour, little Jake. His story filled the airwaves, reaching households far and wide. A little dog, a faithful companion, had become a beacon of hope and a symbol of the tight-knit trucking community's spirit. It was a day that John, Jake, and the others would never forget. Their journey together had seen many ups and downs, but moments like this made it all worth it.
Chapter 7, The Matchmaker Min Pin.
Even the life of an over-the-road trucker like John needs a pause button. John's rest stops were far from luxurious, nestled in the heartland of his uncle's farm. This arrangement suited John perfectly. He couldn't justify spending money on a place he'd only visit a few days a month. During these short breaks from the road, he and Jake would make the necessary stops, picking up mail and packages, restocking supplies, and always, a trip to the local hardware store. These trips to the hardware store were more than just errands. They became something of a social event, especially for Jake, who had developed a unique hobby playing matchmaker for John. The little Min Pin had an uncanny knack for picking out the most beautiful woman in the store and making a beeline for her, giving her the best puppy eyes he could muster, and wiggling his stubby tail. More often than not, his antics would win the woman over, who would then pet him and coo over his cuteness. Naturally, this would lead to a conversation with John. Jake was an excellent icebreaker, his charm and cuteness doing what no pickup line ever could. John, though initially taken aback by Jake's new hobby, played along. It was amusing, after all, and it did get him a few nice conversations and coffee dates. However, his lifestyle always proved to be the stumbling block. The revelation that he was an over-the-road trucker who spent most of his time on the road didn't make for promising dating material. The excitement of a new connection would inevitably fizzle out, leaving John back at square one. Despite these unsuccessful attempts, Jake remained undeterred. each trip to the hardware store was a new opportunity, a new adventure. John had to admit he enjoyed the diversion. It added a bit of unpredictability to his off-road days, a slice of normalcy in his otherwise nomadic lifestyle. And for Jake, it was simply another way he looked out for John, just as he did on their long hauls. He might not have understood the intricacies of human relationships, but he knew one thing for sure: he wanted his best friend to be happy.
Chapter 8: The Long Haul.
With their brief sojourn on the farm coming to an end, John and Jake were ready to hit the road again. They spent their last day stocking up on groceries and necessities for the truck, ensuring they had everything they would need for the journey ahead. John's truck was more than just a vehicle, it was his home away from home. It was fully equipped with a refrigerator, a microwave, and even a television, allowing John to keep up with the world while he was on the road. This helped him save money on dining out and gave him the comfort and convenience of a hot meal or snack whenever he desired. Their upcoming trip was a long one, spanning over 2,000 miles. They were to pick up a load in Knoxville, Tennessee, and deliver it all the way to Los Angeles, California. However, this was no ordinary cargo. It was high security, loaded with valuable electronic equipment that could easily become a target for thieves. Due to the sensitivity of the cargo, they had to maintain strict radio silence about the load. There would be no casual chatter on the CB radio about what they were carrying. Both John and Jake understood the gravity of their assignment. They had to be extra vigilant this time, guarding not just themselves but also the valuable cargo they were transporting. Despite the long road ahead and the responsibility of their cargo, there was a sense of excitement in the air. This was what they lived for: the open road, the sense of adventure, the unpredictability. John, with Jake at his side, knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they could handle it together. As they set off from the farm, the open road greeted them like an old friend, promising new adventures, new experiences, and countless miles of companionship. It was time for another chapter in the lives of the trucker and his loyal Min Pin, the journey that was their life's work, their calling, their home.
Chapter 9: On the Road to Little Rock.
Before setting off on their long journey to California, John always made a point to start with a full tank of fuel. His truck's dual 100-gallon tanks meant he could drive 400 to 500 miles before needing to refuel. This tactic served as a precautionary measure, as it made it more difficult for any would-be thieves in cars to follow him. Upon pulling out of the electronics distribution center, John's strategy was to get on the interstate, heading initially in the opposite direction before taking the next exit to turn around. This diversion served two purposes. First, it threw off anyone who might be attempting to track him from the origin point. Second, it allowed him to survey his surroundings, ensuring that he wasn't being tailed. His in-cab computer showed Little Rock, Arkansas as his first planned stop. With a route set and the road before them, John and Jake were off once again. As they cruised down the highway, the world outside was largely quiet, with the occasional vehicle passing by. One particular vehicle, a four-wheeler, held a young boy who caught Jake's attention. The boy was enthusiastically pumping his arm up and down, the universal signal for wanting to hear a big rig's horn. This was a sight that John and Jake had become accustomed to, and hardly a day went by without a child asking John to sound the horn. As John obliged, little Jake would joyfully join in from the window with his spirited barks. Upon reaching Memphis, the towering glass pyramid, now a sporting goods store, caught their eyes. The duo was used to spotting landmarks along their route, but this particular one always struck a chord. As they crossed the Mississippi River, Jake spent his time scanning the city, his ears perked up and his eyes alert. He'd heard John and other truckers talk about Elvis's sightings, and despite knowing that the king of rock and roll had passed away years ago, Jake couldn't resist the possibility. After all, they were in Memphis, the city of Elvis. Their journey was more than just delivering loads, it was filled with moments like these, with amusing roadside antics and intriguing cityscapes. As they continued westward, the road unfurling before them, their next adventure was just around the bend.
Chapter 10, Arkansas to Oklahoma.
With the lights of Little Rock, Arkansas glinting in the twilight, John and Jake pulled into a truck stop to refuel and rest for the night. Little Rock, the capital city of Arkansas, is known for its scenic landscapes, especially the picturesque Arkansas River flowing through the heart of the city. Its rich history spans the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, making it a hub for American culture and heritage. Getting there early had its perks. John could easily find a well-lit spot under the lamps to park their high-security load. After settling in, Jake excitedly ran over to his favorite tree, his personal pit stop, known only to the experienced canines traversing the I-40. With Jake attended to, John could focus on refueling the truck, grabbing a shower, and preparing for some well-deserved rest. The early night meant they would be up before dawn, ready to beat the city's rush hour and continue their journey. The following morning, as the first light of day seeped into the cab, John and Jake were ready to hit the road again. After a quick restroom break for both and a steaming cup of coffee for John, they pulled out of the truck stop, bound for Oklahoma City. The trip was smooth, interrupted occasionally by excited children motioning for John to sound the truck's horn. And each time, Jake would eagerly join in, barking with all the enthusiasm of a furry co-pilot. Oklahoma City, the capital of Oklahoma, is known for its cowboy culture and Capitol complex, which is surrounded by working oil wells. It's also a city marked by the memory of the tragic bombing in 1995, commemorated by the Oklahoma City National Memorial. John and Jake made a brief stop here, Jake visiting another of his favorite trees, sniffing intently for the PP mail left by fellow canine travelers. Back on the truck, John fixed himself a sandwich, filled Jake's bowl with his favorite kibble, and they resumed their journey. Their next stop would be Amarillo, Texas, another city, another adventure, another tale to add to their road chronicles. The duo was ever ready, ever excited, embracing the unpredictability and endless possibility that lay in the miles ahead.
Chapter 11, Stormy Skies to Clear Horizons.
Their journey continued from Oklahoma to Amarillo, but this leg proved more exciting. The early summer weather had set the stage for potentially powerful storms to develop in the area. Flatlands stretched out in all directions, their unimpeded expanse a notorious playground for monster tornadoes. The weather alert radio buzzed with warnings, sending a ripple of caution through John. He took to the CB radio, reaching out to fellow drivers coming from the other direction for real-time road condition updates. The availability of internet connectivity in the truck was a blessing, allowing John to monitor live weather radar images on his tablet while driving. As they approached Elk City, Oklahoma, they could see the ominous storm front looming in the distance. A stormy skyline and tumultuous clouds gave a foreboding view. A check of the radar reassured John that the brunt of the storm, including a tornado spotted in the distance, was likely to pass about 10 miles north of their route on I-40. Jake, being the ever-vigilant companion, barked at the tornado. John calmly assured him, pointing out the tornado's distance and path. 20 miles later, they were clear of the storm. The clouds parted, replaced by clear, sunny skies, a stark contrast to the weather they'd just outmaneuvered. It was smooth sailing from there to Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo, nicknamed the Yellow Rose of Texas, is known for its vast, open spaces and bright yellow wildflowers that bloom in the spring. Its Texas Panhandle location means it's also well known for its cowboy culture and ranching industry. One of the city's most famous attractions is the Cadillac Ranch, an eccentric art installation featuring brightly painted Cadillac cars buried nose down in the ground. As they neared the city, Jake barked in anticipation at the sight of the big Texan steak ranch. This legendary Amarillo establishment offers a free 72-ounce steak meal to anyone who can finish it all within an hour. John chuckled, telling Jake, "If you were a full-sized Doberman, buddy, we might stand a chance." "But that steak is just too big for us." They pulled into a well-lit parking spot for the night, the twinkle of Amarillo's city lights in the distance. They'd weathered a storm, seen a tornado, and made it to their next destination safely, a testament to their shared bond and resilience on the open road.
Chapter 12, Desert Trails and Close Calls.
Emerging from the bright morning sun, John and Jake hit the road again, departing Amarillo, Texas, for Flagstaff, Arizona. They were slated to pass through several cities, Albuquerque and Gallup in New Mexico, then finally, Flagstaff. The journey would see a significant change in scenery, transitioning from verdant hills to flat, stark desert. Albuquerque, the largest city in New Mexico, is nestled in the Rio Grande Valley. It's known for its rich history, cultural diversity, and the annual International Balloon Fiesta, where hundreds of hot air balloons color the sky. Gallup is a smaller city, celebrated for its vibrant Native American culture and the iconic Route 66 running right through its heart. The drive began smoothly. John savored his morning coffee as Jake checked his designated PP tree one last time before leaving. Given that their cargo was relatively light, the truck would easily conquer the climb up the mountain to Flagstaff, making the journey a breeze. However, about halfway to Albuquerque, they noticed a severe accident on the eastbound side. A big truck lay toppled on its side, a scene of chaos in the otherwise tranquil desert landscape. The chatter on the CB radio revealed the truck driver had been cut off by a car that had slammed on its brakes. Unfortunately, these were familiar tales for truck drivers, people hoping to exploit the million-dollar insurance policies that truckers were required to carry. However, this ploy resulted in fatal consequences. John gripped the wheel tighter, offering a silent prayer for those involved. He and Jake continued on their journey, keenly aware of the hazards they might face. As they traveled, the desert sun set behind them, casting long shadows on the road ahead. Finally, the city of Flagstaff emerged, a welcoming sight in the foothills of Arizona's tallest mountain range. Known as the City of Seven Wonders due to its proximity to the Grand Canyon, Oak Creek Canyon, and other natural landmarks, it was a stark contrast to the flat desert they'd been driving through. As they wound their way up the mountain, the truck easily handling the incline thanks to the light load, John reflected on the day's events, thankful for their safe journey so far. Little did they know, their adventure was only just beginning. Chapter 13, From Flagstaff to California. Upon their arrival in Flagstaff, John and Jake disembarked, eager to stretch their legs. John, cup of coffee in hand, followed Jake as he made a beeline for his favorite tree. However, before they reached the tree, Jake halted abruptly, his nose to the ground, sniffing intently at something. Then, without warning, he dropped onto his back and began to roll around enthusiastically. To John's dismay, Jake was gleefully writhing in the remains of a long-dead armadillo. The scent, appealing only to Jake, was strong enough to make John's stomach churn. Despite Jake's protests, a bath was now absolutely essential. John had an oversized duffel bag tucked away in the truck for such emergencies, allowing him to discreetly smuggle Jake into the truck stop for a bath, a necessity given that some truck stops frowned upon the idea of dogs in their facilities. Feeling much fresher after their shared shower, they returned to the truck. Given their destination in California, John performed a painstakingly thorough inspection of the vehicle. Truck drivers had a cheeky nickname for the state, the Communist State, a moniker born out of frustration for its tendency to overspend on what they deemed frivolous things and then hike up taxes and fines, often at the expense of truckers. Before dawn broke the next day, they were on the move, departing around 4 a.m. Driving through the desert in the sweltering heat of the day was a tiring ordeal best avoided. On this leg of their journey, they would pass through Kingman, Arizona, Needles, and Barstow in California. Kingman, Arizona, is known for its location on the historic Route 66 and its proximity to the Grand Canyon, while Needles, California, boasts of its status as the gateway to the Mojave National Preserve. In Barstow, their planned stop, they would refuel and prepare for the descent down the mountain and the impending truck inspection station that lay on their route. Barstow is a key transportation hub for Southern California, home to major railways, and a key stop on the famous Route 66. As the towns slipped by and the desert landscapes morphed around them, Jake sat alert by John's side. Their journey together was about to take a new turn in the Golden State.
Chapter 14, Down the Mountain.
Departing Barstow, they commenced their descent down the mountain. Trucks shifted into lower gears for the tricky downhill journey, the rumbling sound of John's engine brake, the Jake brake, aptly named after his little companion, reverberating through the air. As if choreographed by fate, they reached the California Highway Patrol inspection station just south of Cajon Junction on the day new officers were being trained. John could only shake his head in resignation, and Jake, anticipating the impending hassle, sought refuge under the passenger seat. The loudspeaker crackled to life, directing John into Inspection Bay 4. With a roll of his eyes and a muttered expletive under his breath, John steered the truck into the bay. What lay ahead was a full-on inspection, the kind where the officers asked not just about the truck, but John's underwear as well. The senior officer, all business, informed John that he had the additional honor of having a drug dog inspect his truck. At this news, Jake popped up, his ears perked at the mention of a canine colleague. A beautiful, stern-looking German shepherd made her way towards the truck, swiftly dismissing Jake's hopeful advances with a single glance. John, on the other hand, had his eye on the rookie officer. With her movie star looks, she was an unusual sight amidst the grizzled inspectors. His careful pre-inspection of the truck in Flagstaff meant that the officers found no faults to penalize him for. Jake, noticing the young officer, trotted over and turned on the full power of his puppy dog eyes, causing her to laugh. The inspection ended with an unexpected bonus, a phone number from the beautiful rookie officer. Smiling to himself, John climbed back into the cab, gave Jake a congratulatory pat, and pulled back onto the road, bound for Ontario.
Chapter 15, Unloading in Ontario.
As they pulled off Interstate 15 towards the distribution center, Jake pressed his snout against the window, staring at the sights that greeted them. Tents and trash littered the streets, a stark contrast to the clean, vibrant city it was just 3 decades ago. The signs of government overspending and the subsequent decay of infrastructure were all too evident. Ontario, a once vibrant hub, had deteriorated into a place John dreaded visiting. Its people, once warm and welcoming, now wore grim expressions and exhibited abrasive behaviors. After navigating the ill-tempered staff at the distribution center, they finally managed to unload their cargo, barely within the legal working hours. With his remaining time running out, John drove them to the local truck stop. It had once been a bustling spot, reminiscent of a mall, where truckers would gather around tables to play cards, share stories, and enjoy each other's company. Now, it was a shell of its former glory, filled with security guards patrolling the area and vagrants pleading for loose change. It was a tangible testament to the rapid deterioration of a place when its inhabitants lost their care. Ontario, California, once a prosperous city, now had the unfortunate reputation of being one of the worst cities for business, despite its once thriving industrial sector. It was also struggling with homelessness, with one of the highest rates in the San Bernardino County. Jake, unhappily trotting towards a large cactus, the only alternative to a tree in this desert landscape, stepped on a prickly thorn. Yelping, he limped back to John, paw raised in distress. Upon removing the thorn, John reassured his friend with a soft pat, only for Jake to whine and look around at the litter-strewn spot he usually found relief. "We need to get out of here," Jake's eyes seemed to say. John returned his gaze, grimly replying, "We can't, Jake. We're out of hours." the government won't let me drive any further." Their shared displeasure was evident as they settled into their temporary home, surrounded by the chaos of a city they once loved.
Chapter 16, A Quake and a Hero.
The final chapter starts in the depths of slumber, with both John and Jake resting after a long day. Suddenly, the truck starts shaking violently, jerking John awake from his sleep. The turbulence was so severe that John tumbled out of his bed, scrambling to grasp the situation. His first thought was a collision, perhaps another truck had slammed into them, but the persistent tremors suggested something else. Drawing back the sleeper curtains, John realized it was an earthquake. Day was just breaking as the earthquake hit, turning the calm morning into a scene of panic. Cars honked and alarms wailed in unison, creating a cacophony of sounds that echoed the chaos. Safely parked, John and Jake weathered the quake in their truck, more startled than hurt. After the quake, John started his day as usual, making a cup of coffee and a breakfast burrito while turning on the news. The reports confirmed his suspicions. A significant 6.0 earthquake had hit Ontario, causing substantial damage and several building collapses. Finishing his meal, John and Jake headed out, taking a walk amidst the blaring sirens and frenzied activity. Their walk brought them upon a collapsed building, where John spotted the familiar face of the young canine training officer they'd met the previous day. Her German shepherd was with her, looking stressed and agitated. Trapped under the rubble was a little girl, crying for her mother and pleading for water. John quickly improvised, tying a bottle of water with a string and signaling Jake to deliver it to the trapped girl. Unhesitatingly, Jake weaved his way through the tangled mess of metal and concrete, navigating the tight spaces that were too small for the larger German shepherd. Locating the girl by her scent, Jake barked to let her know help had arrived, then watched as she quenched her thirst with the water he'd delivered. He stayed by her side, providing comfort and companionship as firefighters worked to free her. Finally, the girl was rescued, and a jubilant Jake emerged from the debris, trotting over to the once aloof German shepherd with a triumphant doggy grin. Clearly impressed by his bravery, the German shepherd returned his greeting, wagging her tail and showering Jake with affectionate licks. In the aftermath of the rescue, the connection between John and the canine officer deepened. She invited him to dinner, and their mutual understanding of the challenges of their respective jobs fostered a bond between them. By the time a month had passed, Jake's name was known coast to coast. He was the small dog with a big heart, who had saved 2 little girls in less than a month. His exploits had turned him into a canine hero, bringing a heartwarming conclusion to the saga of a trucker and his loyal companion. Copyright 2023 LittleTruckerKennel.com, written by David Sardi. Written by David Sardi. Written by David Sardi.